Okay, so here we are at a very unusual stop on our road trip, a cemetery. I know it's a little creepy and odd, but bear with me on this one. One of my very first memories of going on a road trip was to Disneyland when I was around 5 years old. And I remember being so excited that I couldn't even sleep. We were going to the happiest place on earth. At least that's what I was being told. But all of a sudden, my family gets a call that one of our close relatives had passed away. Now, when I heard this news, I didn't really know what to think. Because the only thing I've lost at this point in my life was my pet fish named Herbie, which is kind of a long story, and my Tamagotchi, which was just a digital toy pet that was popular in the 90s. But both were on account of my doing. I was 5. But when the news came to my family about this tragedy, our mood in the car immediately just turned into sadness. My grandma, I remember hearing her say, why, he was so young. And my mom questioned, why did God take him away so soon? I remember seeing tears run down their faces, and to be completely honest with you, the only thing I was concerned about was if we were really still going to Disneyland. But from that moment on, our car ride was pretty miserable. We had to make a detour on our road trip to a cemetery to attend a funeral. I was 5 years old. 5-year-old me was pretty bummed out. Ecclesiastes 7:2 says, "It is better to spend your time at funerals than at parties. After all, everyone dies, so the living should take this to heart." Now, I don't mean to start off this message all gloomy and depressing, but I do want to address a question that I think many of us have had. And this question usually comes in some of the darkest times, the struggles and the hurt, the pain and the loss. And that question is, why doesn't God just do something about it? Why doesn't God just do something? I think we've all wondered this before. Like, God didn't show up in the way that you were expecting. Like, the cancer isn't cured. I still didn't pass my tests. My parents are still separated. My girlfriend or boyfriend, they still broke up with me. My plans didn't go the way I wanted them. Whatever it is in your life where you're expecting God to do something, but He doesn't. Have you ever felt that before? Have you experienced that before? I want to share with you a story in the Bible where Jesus actually shows up late. That's right, Jesus, your boy, He shows up late. Personally, I think this is the second most amazing miracle that Jesus ever does. In fact, it's such a popular story, you've maybe heard it before, and maybe you haven't, but if you have, I want to pretend like we've never read the story. Let's read it for the first time together. This story is jam-packed with some drama and some suspense. Now, in John 11, starting in verse 1, it says this: "Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from the town of Bethany, a village of Mary and her sister Martha." In verse 3 it says, "So the sisters sent word to Jesus, 'Lord, the one you love is sick.'" How would you like to be known as the one Jesus loved? The one, you got a fancy name tag that reads JC Hearts Me, and people be like, "Oh, hey, yeah, that's Lazarus." That would be pretty cool. But here in this story, it starts off with Mary and Martha sending Jesus a quick old school text message saying, "Hey, JC, the one you love is sick. Send." Now, Mary and Martha knew Jesus pretty well. They have had him over at their house for dinner. They've seen him heal people and do many incredible miracles. So Mary and Martha trusted Jesus. In fact, they truly believed that he was the Messiah, God's son. So when they sent that message to Jesus, that quick little simple message, they were sure that their brother Lazarus was going to be okay. Like, cool, Jesus has got this. Like, he's going to take care of this. He's healed random people before. I'm positive he's going to heal the one he loves, aka Lazarus. He's got this. Now, Jesus sends a message right back in verse 4 reading, "When Jesus heard this, he said, 'This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, that God may be glorified through it.'" Underline this, it is for God's glory. Jesus sends a message right back to Mary and Martha saying, I'm just kidding, autocorrect. "This sickness will not end in death." Boom, sent. I'm sure Mary and Martha received this message and they were like, cool. We're good. Our brother is going to be fine. Everything is going to be okay. Now, verse 5 reads like this. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago, the Jews would just try to stone you, and yet you want to go back?" Jesus wasn't done doing some ministry there where he was at. He decided to stay there a little bit longer. Then he planned back to go to Judea. The problem with this, though, was that there's people back in that town that hated Jesus, and they tried killing him with stones. I don't mean like getting high stoning. I'm talking about actual getting rocks and throwing them at Jesus. Pretty scary. Now, I'm sure some of those rocks missed Jesus and were hitting his disciples, and I'm sure that's why they didn't want to go back. So Jesus says this, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." That's what people do. They sleep, get better, watch some Netflix, it's fine. But Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. Verse 14. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, And so for your sake, I am glad I will not be there, so that many people will believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas said to the rest of the disciples, let us go so that we may die with him. Doubting Thomas. He was just kind of doubtful what was going on. He was a Debbie Downer. So they headed to Bethany. On his arrival, Jesus found out that Lazarus had already been dead in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles away from Jerusalem, and the Jews had come to Mary and Martha to comfort her in her loss of her brother. And when Mary heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Why do you think Mary stayed at home? Because she was mad. She was mad at him. I'm sure she was like, "I will cut him. Someone better hold me back if I see Jesus." I think Mary was kind of gangster. She was angry and disappointed, okay? And she did not want to see Jesus. But Martha goes to Jesus and expresses her complete disappointment and sadness to him. "If only you could have shown up sooner, Jesus. My brother would still be here with us. But you were late." In fact, Jesus was filled with compassion. In my favorite childhood verse, because it was really short, in John 11:35, it says, Jesus wept. Jesus loved Lazarus. He cared about him. He cared about Mary and Martha. Jesus walked over to the cemetery where his body was buried, and there was a stone placed over his grave, and Jesus stood before it, and he asked them to remove it. But the people questioned him, saying, "Jesus, his body's been in there for 4 days. It's pretty smelly. I mean, like Taco Bell bathroom smelly, like it's bad." But Jesus says, "No, remove the stone." The next verse is super important. I don't want you to miss this. Then Jesus says in John 11:40, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" Underline, if you believe, underline this, if you believe, you will see the glory of God. Sometimes when we are in those gaps in life where we feel like God is just late, like when he didn't even show up, I think Jesus is trying to give us a hint on what to do. If you believe, you will see God's glory in the midst of your struggle. So here we are in the story where Jesus stands in front of the tomb and calls out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." And the dead man came out with his hands and feet wrapped in strips of linen and cloth around his face. People were literally stunned, standing there with their jaws dropped. They didn't know what to do, so they grabbed bats and chainsaws. I'm just kidding, no. The people were completely shocked though. Then Jesus said to them, "Take off his grave clothes and let him go." From that moment on in life was completely different for Mary, Martha, and their once dead brother Lazarus. I love this story. This story gives me hope in those times where I feel like God is absent. But God is never absent. Even as a pastor, I don't even have all the answers. I'm not sure why sometimes God does what he does. I'm not even sure why you're in the situation that you're in. But I do know 3 things that we can pull from this story. And here's the first thing. So why doesn't God just do something about it? I know he can. I know he can. God is powerful. When God said, "Let there be light," there was light. When he spoke the stars into existence, they were in existence. I believe that God can do miracles even today. And I think Jesus stood over Lazarus' tomb in that cemetery and had to be very specific with what he said, because if he just said, "Come out," I think everything that was in that cemetery would have came out and it would have been like a scene from The Walking Dead, super creepy. But he was specific and he said, "Lazarus, come out." You see, Jesus is bigger than our circumstances. He's bigger than our feelings, and I know that he can, and I think we can trust him in that. Number 2, why doesn't God just do something about it? Sometimes he waits. Sometimes he waits. God's timing is perfect. He created rhythm. He can jump rope better than the rest of us. His timing is better than ours. We only get to see a piece of the puzzle, but God created the puzzle. We only get to see a piece of someone's story, but God created the story. And the story of Lazarus wouldn't have been the same if Jesus didn't wait. There is power and purpose in the waiting. So sometimes he waits. The last one. Why doesn't God do something about it? Well, I know I can trust him in the meantime. I know that I can trust him in the meantime. See, God is love and never fails. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. God's track record is perfect. He's the best place where you could place your trust in. Not your best friend or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your own abilities. Jesus is someone that you can trust. You see, when I was at that funeral when I was 5 years old, I remember understanding death. To me at the time, it was the end. It was the end of our journey, end of our trip. But I told you that Lazarus' miracle was the second most amazing miracle. In fact, the most amazing miracle Jesus ever did was conquer death. He did that. He paid the ultimate price because he loves you and me. Because of his absolute love for humanity, he died on the cross. And this cemetery to me is no longer the final destination of our road trip. The end is not the end. Through Jesus, we now have eternal life. And my prayer for you is that you will believe in the midst of the hardest times, that you will see God's glory at work. So why doesn't God just do something about it? Well, one, I know He can. Sometimes He waits, and I can trust Him in the meantime.